My name is Patricia Stranahan. I'm chair of the board of Quintessence Theater Group, and welcome this evening for a very special event post-matinee. I hope you enjoyed the Tempest, and thank you so much for coming to Quintessence and our somewhat shabby but much beloved Sedgwick Theater. And I hope you become, if you aren't regular theater goers here, I hope you make Quintessence part of your theater going experience. This afternoon, I am very happy to say a few words about our talkback. Our founder and artistic director Alex Burns is going to sit down with Quintessence's dear friend Larry Pressman. This is Larry's second performance at Quintessence Theater, and perhaps his most demanding one. But we've been absolutely delighted to have him here. And I'm going to turn it over. Now listen, if you're not tired of Larry, which I'm sure none of you are, tonight at 9 o'clock on NBC, on Magnum PI, Larry's the guest star. So tune him in and see the other half of his life. He's not always doing Shakespeare, folks. So, this way I will turn it over.
Ed, thank you for that.
Hello, Larry.
Oh, yeah.
Good.
See you in a while. Yeah.
Thank you all so much for being here. I'm Alex Burns, the founding artistic director of Quintessence. So this project takes a lot out of Larry. So I'm really grateful that you're here with us for a brief conversation. Larry and I have many, many connections.
Yes.
In the world and our lives of theater. The most obvious one is that we both went to Northwestern University.
Go Cats.
Yeah, and that is truly the universal connection that brought us together here. My college roommate, Max Schulman, was the director for Awaken Sing, who is dear friends with Larry, and Max got Larry here. And I remember the first time that I heard that we were maybe going to get Larry Pressman, who I always thought of as being the doctor on Nuki Hauser at MD, was going to come to Quintessence. I was mind blown and was like, there's no way this guy's going to come. We were calling his agent, having these long conversations.
They weren't happy.
It wasn't gonna, it didn't seem like it was gonna happen. And then suddenly, one day, with a lot of boxes, Larry showed up. And
Less boxes this time.
less boxes this time. And walked into our office. And I was very nervous. But I think I remember, Larry, you saying, this feels like home already.
It was. That's exactly what I felt. If I was smart enough to say it, good on me.
And that was the beginning of our...
Can I give the other side of that? As soon as I met him, and we had the Northwestern connection, which is a massive one. And in my case, quite obviously, many years before Alex and Max were probably born, for sure. I graduated in '61, and I was taught by a woman named Alvina Krause. And she had a theater, which some of you may know existed, up in the Poconos called Eaglesmere.
Oh my God.
Has anybody ever heard of it?
Yes.
Have you? Good, good. And we, all young people, we were none of us over 21 or so, went and played everything. I played mostly old men, frankly, all into my college career. So my brother came to see me in my first job as a person my age, and he said, "You're the only person I know to whom a sports coat is an insurmountable prop." I didn't know what to do with my hands. I didn't have an ear trumpet or a cane or no props. So I came into the office, and it did feel like the winter home of Eaglesmere. I mean, that's really what I felt. And I thought, oh, I have to be here. I've never felt that quite any place else except Eaglesmere. because there was a dream attached to Evansmere. We were all young and dreamers. She was the head dreamer, and she was quite old, from our term, 65, I wish. And I felt that energy with him. And he's probably the most seductive human being I've ever met in my life. And I mean that in a really good way, in the sense that you just have to serve his vision. There are not many people I would say that about, that I feel that way about. In fact, maybe 4 in my lifetime, and he's the last one. Because this will be my last one, I think. Notice I said I think. But I believe this is my last stage performance. I'm 83 3/4, and it's grueling. And it's taken a big toll on my body and on my voice, as you can hear, and maybe even in my soul, because you have to give part of your essence up. And I can't tell you that what it means to trust someone in my business. You know, it's very rare. It's just very rare. And at the end of our time, when Max had finished Awake and Sing, Alex and I stood on the street corner out there by Bread and whatever that is.
First Bread, yeah.
Yeah, or the late lamented. And he said a play, I won't mention it. I said, no, I don't think so. And he said, what about the Tempest? And then COVID happened, because we would have done it much sooner, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
I'm asking.
Yes.
No.
That was-
So we had to wait. And I feel like the spring that's happening so beautifully outside is happening in the theater audience. I felt it today. You know, more and more people are coming as the week goes on. More and more people are taking the chance to participate in the last great humanistic event that's neither political nor has any other agenda, but, as Prospero says, to entertain. And he does that. And this production is almost impossible for a theater of this size, with its resources. So please get your checkbooks out. And what we did with what we had, what he did with what we had, including the stage design, by the way, and the lights, and who knows what music, I suppose, was his. And we were lucky enough to be able to fulfill a play like this in a theater this size for an actual theater-going community that has trained itself to come, to listen, to like, to dislike, to give themselves over to, here's the word, magic. Theater's magic. Films aren't magic. They're great. I love them. Big film guy. But they're not magic. You know, flickering images are not magical. Human beings breathing with you is the last magical circle. All the religions have some event that's almost like theater, but isn't. All of them. Circular. Circle is fantastic. So that's my other side of it.
Yeah.
A little long, but there it is.
So, speaking of why we are here, this writer that we have a mutual love affair with. What is it about Shakespeare throughout your life that has continued to bring you back to him?
I'm getting very emotional. I started to be very glib and say the words. The words are magic. The way he puts words together, just, the older I get, the more mind blown I get. You know, I listen to rap music, I listen to current music, and I like a lot of it. And I like the word play in rap a lot. I don't like the gangster stuff so much, but it's just generational. Curse pretty well. He makes my imagination start to work. There's something, it's like a fish hook that goes down into you and brings up things that are not related to, you don't think they're related to what you're actually doing, but they are in fact exactly what you're doing. They're the essence of you. And only that writer conjures that with me. And during COVID, my COVID sanity was to start learning as many of the sonnets as I could learn. And one of my favorites, without telling me, because we didn't talk about this, was put to music in this. And it's fantastic sonnet. And he speaks to me, I know he speaks to me across centuries, just hundreds of years. And at the same time, he seems like he's my buddy, like my friend, like like when we were kids, secret friends. He's my secret friend. He has all my thoughts, he has all my feelings. He's very tender, or he's very fierce. The fierceness in this play, I did not expect until I started looking at it, studying it. I didn't think it would be fierce. But if you follow him as an actor, he will never lead you in the wrong direction. There are rules, and unfortunately those rules are becoming diminished with younger actors. I wish they wouldn't. England still keeps them up pretty much, but they've gone sort of boring in a lot of their productions lately, because they won't take chances. But I think he speaks to my soul. He is my soul. I'd like to think that anyway. Yeah. I started on him very young. I had a father who was an immigrant, and he was 12 when he got here. And he was an autodidact. Her grandfather, this lady here, my niece. And I remember he had all sorts of books in the basement. Dickens, Tolstoy, which he read to us. He told us the stories, couldn't read to us. And he had also, we were Jews, we had the Old Testament. And those stories were as vivid as anything I've ever encountered until my father started telling us the stories of Shakespeare. And my brother, I have a kid brother, well, he's a kid to me, 81. A kid to me, just a awesome around. He and I took to that. We love the Old Testament, but then so much of Shakespeare's structure is based on the King James Bible. The structure of the verse is very laid out in the way that the King James Bible is. And if anyone hasn't ever looked at a actual facsimile of the King James Version, not the annotated one, not the facsimile, what do you call it, abridged one, but the facsimile, the whole deal, you can't understand that. If you've been lucky enough to get to a high church service in England, or as we now think, a Catholic service in England, you might hear echoes of what he heard that you heard tonight in what I spoke. And also, he is the only playwright, great playwright, in my opinion, who has stages. His early plays are one thing. His middle plays are another thing. This later group of plays are yet another. So you never, ever run out of excitement. You know, if you're doing Henry V with a regular verse line, and you're saying, once more unto the breach, dear friend, once more, you just know that was great outside at the Globe. This play was inside, we think, when they moved inside. This play was based on a masked idea, M-A-S-Q-U-E idea. So he had, by this point, become so facile with his iambic pentameter, his meter, that he could do what rap does, which is bend. Rap bends words all the time, bends phrases, it shoves it out in a different way. It's what I think is exciting about it. And it so much mirrors rap. I keep looking at you, I'm sorry, but you're the age that I listen. I'm sorry. But see, rap so much represents the generation that produced it. You talk like that sometimes. Part of it's this thing Shakespeare didn't have, this thing. So I taught a Shakespeare class once for a friend of mine. I'm not a teacher. And I taught this class, and the first thing I did, just instinctively, after about 2 scenes I did it. I said, listen, there's a break coming up. I want everybody to leave their phones on their seats. And the horror was just wonderful. And I said, listen, I'm a phone user, addicted, but I'm doing it for purpose. I want you to go out in the hallway, in the lobby, and talk to each other. They came back and they were absolutely, I'd broken their spirit. Didn't mean to do that. And I said, look, what I heard in the 2 scenes I heard was that you talk Shakespeare just like you talk a text. So to be or not to be, that is the question. It's not Shakespeare. That you killed the music. So from there we went to, I said, the assignment, I'm not going to be here next week, thank God, because stone me. But the assignment is to get a magazine article. I remember my father reading to us. Does anybody still read to their kids? I hope so. Please. Because it not only was a great time between parents and kids, but it accustomed the ear to receive words that were not written, that were not short, that were actually long and unabbreviated. And I always think that this thing does this to my thoughts, and this does that to my thoughts.
That's interesting.
It's a rhythm thing. But this play, and about 4 others, break all the rules he set up in the other plays. And the questions are always with the editors and the smart guys. I'm all one of those. Why? And the best we can come up with is we've moved inside now. There was candlelight, not just court performances, but regular performances were done that way. We know Elizabeth never probably sat outside Shakespeare in Love aside. She probably never did that. But she did go inside. And we know there were many performances, particularly of 12th Night, inside Windsor Palace.
Yeah.
And it was, it changed everything. I like to think that he just listened harder, and as speech changes, our speech is changing, from my generation to the next generation, to my niece's generation, to the next generation beyond that, it has to change, otherwise it dies. And he was all about growth. And just, he kept his ears open. I think he went to the docks. I think he went to the taverns. I think he went to the palaces. I think he was like Mozart. This whole thing of, was he Shakespeare? Of course he was. Absolutely he was. No courtier could write stage directions in the text as good as Shakespeare did, because he was an actor. He knew how to do it. He knew how to tell me, through centuries past, how to take a pause in this play. And it's a strict pause. And I'm pretty strict about it. I think he was like Mozart. You know, they always said, well, how could this country boy from Stratford pop? Please. Mozart was this prodigy. He's a prodigy. Doesn't that satisfy anybody's curiosity? Was he Shakespeare or the Lord? Who was it? Who are these people they tell it? I forget who they are. Elizabeth the First, maybe. Oh, please.
So, this play,
This play.
this great, magnificent play, many think it was Shakespeare's own attempt to create a kind of ending for himself as a writer, through the Prospero sort of closing off his journey and releasing his powers and spirits. I'm curious, obviously hoping this is not your last journey of such on stage, but for you, when you were working on it, were there any revelations for you?
Yeah.
Things that you discovered? You
Quite a
talked
few.
about ferocity, but I'm just curious.
Quite a few.
if you would share.
The ferocity just appeared, and I can tell you the speech it appeared on, because I grew up as an actor admiring John Gielgud. I hope some of you remember it. I remember he came once to talk to a drama class I was in, and he said, you know, I think it's all a foreign language. And whenever I saw a Shakespeare play, I think I have to learn the language again, which might help some people. That thing you say about takes 10 minutes, he thought it took a little longer than that. He was very flowery, and he was gifted with a voice from the gods. I'm clearly not gifted that way. I'm gifted in another way. And I was also trained in a method way. So we asked different questions than maybe Sir John ever asked a play. Our Revels Now are ended. He used to do in a program called Ages of Man. And it made you cry. It was so beautiful. And he did it as if it were his farewell to the theater and the farewell to the world. I immediately thought, I can't do it that way. He's saying, everything I lived for, Prospero, everything I stood for, every book I read, every conjurer's trick I studied, meant nothing to the evil in the world. Nothing. That's where it started. And then there's a break in the play that I always thought was a bad break. At the end of Act 4, Prospero goes off with Ariel to chase them with dogs. And the beginning of Act 5, he comes on having had a Paulist conversion. I said to, does everybody know what a Paulist conversion is? Okay. The conversion of St. Paul, was a Roman soldier, I believe, happened on the way. He was taking some Jewish prisoners and Christians to kill them, and he was on a horse. There's a great Caravaggio painting of it, and he was struck by the light of God, an actual infusion, and he fell off his horse, and he got up and he became a converted Christian. I said to Alex on the phone, I'm concerned about this, because I think it's bad theater. When it happens off stage, it's always bad, it seems to me. You pay to see it happen here. You're there. I didn't know you were there. Will you move over here? No, okay. So now I know you're there. I'll talk to you. So then began to examine that speech that I thought was fierce for some reason. And the whole mask seemed different to me. It seemed that he doesn't believe for a second what Ariel's brought him. He can't understand why it's gone wrong until he realizes that Caliban and the evil he represents, that darkness he owns at the end, acknowledge mine, is in him and has been in him all along. It wasn't just in Antonia, it wasn't just in Alonzo, it was in him. And suddenly the whole thing changed for me. The little lines like Ariel's saying, do you remember that I was going to, at the end, he has that breakdown thing, and Ariel says, do you remember I was going, where did you leave these varlets? Do you remember I left them in a, he's treating a destroyed human being from my point of view. He'll never be the same because he wants, at the end of the play, the mercy he calls. He wants to give it, he wants to receive it, he wants to inhabit it. He always seemed to me to be interesting, and in the sense that there are a couple of other characters like this in Shakespeare. Richard II is like this. The Duke in Measure for Measure is like this. He abdicates responsibility. Where have we seen that recently? Really? So, that always interested me, why somebody has the burden. You know, Elizabeth I, his queen, always talked about the burden of responsibility. She was huge, she was an excellent writer and wrote in Latin fluently. And she often wrote about the burden and responsibility of leadership. And we're seeing it now in our lives, in our form of governments, not just in royalist terms. We're seeing it all over the place, you know. And so for him to make that mistake, you know, what's that, the tragic flaw? To make that mistake early on, and to pay for it with exile, essentially, he deserves it in some ways. He left a kingdom that loved him. He says, they love me. But he got entranced with magical things. We've all had shiny toys, so we've gotten entranced with. And I think my revelation about the play is, because I always worried about this when I read it before, does he have a journey? I think he has a wallop of a journey.
Yes.
Does that answer it?
Very much so.
I'm close.
Let me open it to you. Does anyone in our audience have any questions? Yes.
I have a question about this mask idea. I guess it was you who developed it, but I would be very interested in hearing some more about what you were thinking about, how you conceived of it, and what it means to you.
Yes. So.
And you as well.
So there are really two different worlds of mask that we're using in this production. We have both the theatrical masks from the commedia tradition, as well as the actual event of the mask, which was of this genre and period of theater. And one of Shakespeare's contemporaries, Ben Jonson, wrote a whole series of plays which were actual masks, in which gods and spirits and fairies would come on to entertain and tell these somewhat moralistic tales of love and politics and history, and it really seems to have been the kind of like Michael Bay film of theater at the time, with huge fireworks and costumes and wagons, and I've always been so fascinated that this play, which is about a removal from society, where we go to this island, this place of exile, this place of no civilization, the impulse that Prospero has is to put on the most extravagant play possible, or the most extravagant form of entertainment possible. And the whole play stops for this mask that happens. And I always, whenever I go to see Tempest, I always usually judge it on the mask and on the harpy. The harpy, because most productions cut both of those things. And those are two moments in the play to me where the play asks for us as theater makers to use all of our imaginary forces to create the most awesome things possible, gods and monsters. And so I was very excited to really try and jump into both of those. And as somebody who loves the world of opera as well as theater, how cool is it to actually have to try and stop a play and put on an opera?
Well, if you're not gonna tell the story, then I'm gonna tell it. Well, your first production of this play had masks, didn't it?
Oh yeah, so
Oh,
that's true
yes.
too.
How old were you?
I think I was 11. 11 when I first did The Tempest.
Yeah.
My little sister played Prospero. She actually came and saw the show on Friday.
Oh, did she?
She had some notes, but no, you should see the things she says to me. But the other part of it that I thought was really interesting to me is I feel we are as Americans, very scared to look at class and class distinctions, specifically in comedy. And the world of the commedia mask inherently gives you permission to kind of start thinking about roles and archetypes and caste systems very specifically, in a very clear way. And we're fortunate enough to have this amazing mask making team who happens to live 3 blocks away from our theater, who we've been collaborating with before. And so I said, hey, I just have this idea. What if we actually used the commedia archetype that Shakespeare was stealing from and put it on the face of the actor and see what happens? And so for me, a lot of it was organic and amazing to watch the actors come to life in different ways. And as you know, we had 7 actors playing what is usually done by 16 actors. And so I think they were also helpful to us in distinguishing those different ideas. And something that was really sad to me is that in a number of the debates over the sort of voice of this play and the voice of the Western tradition in these plays and the themes of colonialism and patriarchy, and this play was vilified and sort of canceled for a little while. And every time I come back and read it, while all those themes are very much a part of the larger narrative, the ultimate sort of resolution of the play and the evolution of the characters, and just speaking of Prospero, and its understanding of the humanism of every single being, from the spirit to the monster to the king, is so profound that it seems to me to transcend that. So masks to me also allowed us to indulge in our childlike fantasies of gods and monsters, and sort of really look at the play in a much vaster sense than the literal space, which is where I feel like most storytellers, specifically in America, are getting caught up right now. So that was the fun we had.
And we had a mask class, because these mask makers are in fact, they are actors who worked with masks and have used masks. And if anyone has ever acted, if any actors are in here, and you've ever acted with a mask, it's a absolutely extraordinary experience. It's where what the Greeks used. And I have over my desk at home a print I treasure, because in the Greek theater, they used to bring the mask to the actor, and the actor would study the mask before putting it on, in order to be that face, and then to do this. And so that experience, even with Prospero's very brief use of the mask, he becomes the courtier. He can't help it. It's his face. It's the face he fled from, but it's still his face. And Ariel reminds him of that. You have this mask.
And then he takes it off.
And then he takes it off
and then-
because he wants to be a different kind of ruler, I believe. I believe he sells himself a little short at the very end by saying, I'll just go retire there and I'll grieve for the fact that I don't have my daughter anymore. I don't think that's what he's going to do. I think he's going to become a different kind of ruler. I think he will live up to he forsakes the magic. He forsakes it, however you want to read it. Goodbye to the theater. He doesn't want that anymore. He wants something more human. And the funny thing about a mask, with an actor, you don't become more mask-like. You become inside while you're wearing it, more human. I can't explain it, but it's true. And the other thing we did, which I think bears, we had 2 days of clown class. Something I've always wanted to do, never did. And it was heaven. It was heaven. Because you just learn to be. She just Angie, her name is. She just makes you accept that you're just a person on a platform or in a room. Just, that's who you are. You start there, and everything comes out of that. Correct?
Yeah.
It's getting late.
Yes.
So, sort of along those same lines, I wonder why Ariel was so sexy and also so embodied. What was your thinking about that?
That's a great question. We have, I mean, a lot of what we do comes out of both the text and then the actor that gets to speak the text. And Pat Moran, who played Ariel, is just an extraordinary essence of a human being without any costumes. And so really it was, how can we create a visualization that allows that mercurial essence of this actor to be completely expressed and not in any way kind of blocked. And we did for a little while have an idea for a mask for Ariel and other pieces to wrap Ariel, but then the play kept asking it for it to change, and every time Ariel would come on stage, Prospero would have some kind of line that would seemingly respond to a costume change. So we're like, okay, so this is a taller. So
Changes his skin.
changes his skin and just continues to evolve. And just watching Pat move in rehearsal, and then as we started to put clothing on him, was also was truly the canvas. And I think one of the most interesting parts of the creative process for us was really both of us, Larry and I both agreed that the relationship between Prospero and Ariel is the kind of central relationship and kind of romance in the play, and that its evolution and in all of its complexity is really where we get to truly see Prospero's evolution as a human, and Ariel's evolution as a spirit.
Also, there's something, Alex and I both saw, I think you saw it in Life maybe, the Simon Russell.
Yeah.
There was one done at Stratford, England,
Yeah.
in which the Ariel was when they have to put all those sensors all over you and then projects an image. And it was, for the first 2 minutes. And then after that, it had no meaning. It was just another movie gimmick. There's something about transforming human flesh by the imagination into a spirit that's just far more essential than flying. And they're going to fly, and somebody in the cast, his wife is going to play Ariel this summer in a festival, and they're going to fly her. And I saw Peter Pan when I was a kid. You know, it is magical when you're about 6. You know, we've gone very far. You know, films have, tentpole productions of Shakespeare are the same as tentpole movies. You know, they're just all the tricks and all the gimmicks and all the fireworks you can do. And after a while, if you've seen one, you've seen them all. And I'm a big, by the way, so you know, an MCU universe person. I also got into that in COVID, so I'm a big Avengers guy. But, you know, they're to kill time while you can't go outside and be with people. They're not to make it a statement of personal triumph.
And I would just say one of my favorite things, because it's a bodysuit, is that there are so many times where I feel like you just almost only see Pat's face and his head, especially the way he moves. So you almost get the feeling that he's levitating, which is as much about his movement as it is about the
And
car.
there was a moment where he was so tender, when he was about to put you in your robe, and he came up behind you and he just, on your back, so you know he was there. And it was the most tender thing I've ever seen on stage. And I'm gonna cry talking about it. He was just right there. And then it was like, just letting you know, and it was so beautiful.
And I think the mirror of that moment, if I may say, is when I release him here. When I take his shoulders and just let him go.
Yes.
It's this sort of mirror image of touching my back and I touch him. It's the only time I touch him. And thank you for noticing that. 'Cause it gets me every night.
Well, thank you all so very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
We have one more week of the Tempest through next Sunday, so please help us to continue to spread the word, because we'd love to continue to have these wonderful audiences through our closing. And thank you, Larry, for being here, for giving us the